this is Animat, and welcome back to the Muppet Vlog. And this time we have a little bonus episode for you guys, in which I will be looking into the more well-known pilot episode of The Muppet Show, in contrast to the Muppet Valentine special. This time we will be looking into the pilot of The Muppet Show known as Sex and Violence. Now, first things first, some of you might be wondering, why the fridge is this called Sex and Violence? I mean, Muppet Show is made more for families, so why is the pilot episode also known as Sex and Violence? Well, that is because the first thing that you see in this episode, or in this pilot in particular, you see this.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the end of sex and violence on television.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Muppet Show.
So basically the first thing that you see from this pilot is the big words of sex and violence. And then afterwards, Crazy Harry would just come in and he would just blow it up because it's the declaration of the end of sex and violence on television. I don't know how much there would be during the 70s at that time, but I don't know, like, maybe there is enough so that another show would come in to end it all off. And, by the way, that's another quick note that I would like to add, is that in this pilot, they actually changed the name of Crazy Donald. Now it's Crazy Harry, as we know today, since beforehand, in the Valentine special, he was known as Crazy Donald. But going into the actual pilot, this is where the structure of the setting actually came from for what we know today as the Muppet Show, where basically there's this guy who wants to put on a show, and often we would look at what's going on behind the scenes, like a little bit of the kooky adventures that happen backstage. But instead of being Kermit, we have a new Muppet named Nigel, who would later in the actual Muppet Show be the conductor of the whole show. But then afterwards, he also has a bit of other side characters that would be prominently featured. Like, the main ones for Sex and Violence would be Nigel, Floyd, and Sam the Eagle, along with a bunch of other Muppets that actually originated from this pilot. So it's not just Nigel, Floyd, and Sam, but also the entirety of Electric Mayhem with Dr. Teeth, Janice, Zoot, and Animal. And even at the credits, what's actually interesting, they actually had the Jim Henson Muppet be a part of the Electric Mayhem, but as the banjo player, which is something that never actually happened later in the actual Muppet Show, considering that they're more focused on being, a rock band. Afterwards, there are other ones as well. There is the Swedish Chef, and there's also the Statler and Waldorf that do make an appearance. And there is also Miss Piggy and Dr. Julius Strangepork. This is actually their first appearance onto this. However, the way that they are used is a lot more different than they would become in the actual Muppet Show. Now, in terms of characters like everyone in the Electric Mayhem, it's pretty much the same. This is the same Electric Mayhem that we know. In fact, they actually did sing a song that would later appear in an actual episode of The Muppet Show is, I think it was the song Dynamite that they sang, but in here they sang it at a much slower pace than they would in the actual episode. And if you guys don't recall, in the actual episode of The Muppet Show, when they would sing Dynamite, like every time Dr. Teeth would mention something like atom bomb or dynamite or bomb or anything like that, suddenly there would be an explosion behind them and things are just going hectic. Maybe with the help of Crazy Harry, but I don't know, it's been a little while since I've seen that bit. But yeah, the Electric Mayhem are pretty much prominently featured as they are, but everyone else is a little bit different. Sam the Eagle, for example, he's not necessarily as patriotic as he is now. Like, he is still the kind of character that's a lot more serious and wants to maintain some class and some control onto the show. But they actually show him with a shtick going on, and, like, this is pretty much repetitive throughout the entire episode, where there's this running gag that Sam the Eagle would always lose to like whatever board game that they would play, or any little game like chess or checkers or Scrabble or anything like that. And I have to admit, the Muppetry in there, like the form of puppetry that happens during that time, it's actually quite hilarious. Not intentionally, but just on what happens. Like, here's an example. Like, when they would play checkers, like, you just see Nigel, you could tell that they don't know what they're doing, so what just happens is, like, it's like, okay, here's my turn. Jump, 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 jump. It's like, you have no idea what you're freaking doing, are you? So, anyways, that was actually quite hilarious to see, but going back into the characters, the other ones that were a lot more different, the Swedish Chef. Now, he is kind of the same thing, admittedly, but with the format that they build upon onto his segments, they're a little bit more different. Like, it's still the Swedish Chef, and he still speaks Swedish, but not as, how can I put this? It's not as a Jürgen, Fergen, Hurgen, Bergen, you know, it's like they're trying to realistically be Swedish in a way, with a little bit of English sprinkled on the side, but at the same time, while he's cooking, there would be like these Chinese or Japanese subtitles going on in order for like the people to understand, and I guess that's kind of the joke of his entire sketch in there. The other ones, there's Statler and Waldorf. Unlike in the show where they would always be featured in their little box up on the theater, instead they're just being old people. That's their whole bit. Like, they're not hecklers, they're just old people just sitting on their lounge chairs, just talking to each other about the fact that they are old. That's it. And in there, they actually do play the old people bit. Like, how can I put this? Like, their energy is a lot more shorter than they are in the actual show. And as for Miss Piggy and Dr. Julia Strangepork, what is actually funny is that, like, this is, like, the sketch that they appeared in is supposed to be, like, this Gene Shalit parody, where this Muppet character would talk about, like, movies that are going on, and one of which is called Planet of the Pigs, and which is, of course, like, a parody of Planet of the Apes. And in there, we actually do see different versions of Dr. Strangepork and Miss Piggy. With Dr. Julia Strangepork, what's actually interesting is that he's supposed to be portrayed more as the villain, where he's more of the head scientist, kind of like how Dr. Zaius is in Planet of the Apes. But the big difference is that more of his hairstyle, like, they want to portray him more as the evil mad scientist in a way, but he actually still has that same accent as he did in the actual show. And as for Miss Piggy, this is actually quite interesting. Like, we know this is Miss Piggy. This is easily recognizable as Miss Piggy, but she is actually played by a female performer instead of Frank Oz. And also, you know how in season 1 where she has different set of eyes instead of like how we recognize her now? Yeah, in here, they're just 2 dots. They're like legit just like 2 little dots. Kind of like most of the other pig Muppets that you would normally find in the show. And I guess in a way, it kind of looks weird. Like, the fact that we all know Miss Piggy as this certain image, and then we see Miss Piggy with just these 2 little beady eyes, it just, I don't know, it kind of makes it weird. This is like the Pod People version of Miss Piggy. But yeah, but at the same time, there are many other sketches that happen simultaneously. There's this wrestling match that's been going on where what happens is that they would end up like trying to tie each other into this massive knot. And then there's another one with all these birds, and they each have their own unique catchphrase. Like, one squawks out, "What do you say?" or "For crying out loud," or "Oh boy," or "Oh really?" And the story is basically how these birds tried to pick up chicks but failed. That's basically the whole gist of it. Some of the other ones that appeared, there's one called Theater of Things, which is basically a pun with the things that they have. Like, for example, like a land of crayons have now gotten their new ruler, if you know my drift. And then there's also another one, which is actually so weird, is they would constantly show Mount Rushmore, and like all the heads that are there, like Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln, they would all trade knock-knock jokes to each other. That's all they do. And it's like, the tone in there is just so weird that it kind of feels like they're not even telling jokes. And I don't know what the big punchline is, but I think, from what I've gathered, is that George Washington is stupid, because at the end of most of the times that we see Mount Rushmore, like, one of them has to always ask, so it was like, hey, you get it, George? No. And that's it. And, like, even the last time that we see them, like, they didn't even try to make a joke. It's legit, like, knock knock, who's there? George who? George Washington. And that's it. Like, that's literally it. They didn't even, like, that's like the maximum of not even trying to make a joke. And it was the ultimate moment of what the fridge was that about. There is also another one where, like, you got these two weird alien creatures, like, just bashing each other with clubs, and then these more sophisticated aliens come in to try to communicate with them. And afterwards, oh, there is actually a backstory to this, which is another element from which that would translate onto the actual Muppet Show that we know, is that there is a backstory where they're trying to throw a pageant, and they're trying to really set this up, and it's mostly this pageant of what is the most deadly sin. So afterwards, we would see, like, these Muppets coming in representing their sin, whether it be like greed, gluttony, lust, sloth, amorous, or is it amorous? No, sorry, no, it's envy, and all those others. And basically, it's like to set this all up to make it the grand finale at the end. Now, in terms of the structure of the entire episode of what happened, holy crap! Like, this is inconsistent. It's almost a godforsaken mess. Because what basically happens is that on the sketch, what happens, it starts out with one thing, and then suddenly it always jumps to the next. Now, in the original Muppet Show, the Muppet Show that we all come to know, what happens is that they would go sketch after sketch. Like, one sketch happens, and then suddenly a musical number happens, and then a sketch happens, like, you know, like they got that formula going. But in this one, they go joke after joke. So, without any single warning, it just constantly jumps into, oh, now it's this thing. Oh, now it's that thing. Oh, now it's this thing. It's like, out of the blue, like, you never know what to expect. Like, it cannot sit still for like a minute long, and it is extremely rare that there would be a moment that the episode would just, you know, sit there, or it would sit for like one whole sketch, like just let it finish. The only ones that I can think of that they legit finished in one shot, it was the Birds one, and it was also the Theater of Things. That's basically it. The rest, they would always jump. It's like, okay, it's the Swedish Chef, and then suddenly, oh yeah, actually there is another one, the Film and Focus with the Planet of the Pigs. That's another one where they showed in its entirety. But the rest, like, it would, like I said, it would jump into the Swedish Chef, and then suddenly At the Dance, and then suddenly the Wrestlers, and then suddenly Statler and Waldorf. It would always jump without you knowing. It's like, you know, it's like completely out of the blue. There's no transition to it. It just immediately jumps right there. And with that said, one additional thing I would like to add that is a big difference between the Sex and Violence and the Muppet Show is the fact that there is no laugh track. And things get weird when you take away the laugh track. I mean, I think the best way to put it, have you ever watched, like, I know this is actually a thing that's going on, is that, like, on the internet, you can actually search for an episode of something like The Big Bang Theory, where they would take away the laugh track, and for the rest of the episode, it just becomes awkward. That's basically what you get with Sex and Violence, is that, you know, after, like, knowing the Muppet Show and you've seen episode after episode, then you watch this one thing that doesn't have a single laugh track, it just makes it weird. It actually makes it not as funny as the Muppet Show in a way. It's kind of a weird thing to mention. But with, also, actually, there is one more thing I forgot to mention as well, is that there's also an abundance of cameos. Now, there's no actual special guest star that appeared, much like in the Valentine's special, but there's a lot of Muppet cameos. Like, from time to time, there would be characters like Kermit or Rolf or Ernie that would just pop out of nowhere, and like they could appear either in the audience watching the wrestling, or they would just make like one quick little gag at the dance sequences. And when looking into it, as like in terms of like the pilot of the Muppet Show, you could definitely tell there are a lot of elements here, much more than in the Valentine's special, that has been adapted onto the Muppet Show. And there are a lot of things that I have mentioned, like the whole setting that they're trying to put on a show, and like you see the shenanigans that happen backstage. A lot of the Muppet characters would end up appearing in the Muppet Show, like Sam the Eagle, everybody in the Electric Mayhem, Statler and Waldorf, the Swedish Chef. Like, that's pretty much been, that has been adapted onto this, and often the characters had to be retweaked a little. And on top of that, there is also the element of sketches. And I guess that would be the most interesting part of this pilot, is to see where these elements from the Muppet Show originated, how these characters were, like, how did they all began, and then they would grow into these recognizable, prominent characters onto the Muppet Show, and especially some of the big ones as well, including, like, Miss Piggy, the Electric Mayhem, and, you know, all those people. That's basically the big thing with it. So my recommendation is more for the Muppet fans who want to see the origins of where many of the elements of the Muppet Show came from. So that's mostly the big thing. This is a Muppet Show pilot, so I can only recommend it to fans of the Muppet Show to actually learn a thing or two. Because if you're just gonna watch it like any other Muppet Show, yeah, you're gonna be a bit disappointed with it. But anyways, that is pretty much it for this bonus little episode of the Muppet Vlog. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and pretty soon I'll go back to the regular episodes, and hopefully they will be a lot better than Sex and Violence. But until next time, see you later, dudes!